They thought they broke me. All they did was forge a demon. I still remember the sound. Not the screaming, not the crying, but the silence afterward. That hollow, suffocating silence that filled our house on Maple Street every Sunday morning, when the world outside pretended everything was perfect and we pretended right along with them. My name is Rebecca, but back then, I was nobody. Just a shadow in my own home, a punching bag for my father's rage and a punchline for my mother's cruelty. This is the story of how I stopped being nobody and became the nightmare they never saw coming. It started on a Sunday, as these things always did. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. My son Ethan was 7 years old, sitting cross-legged in the living room, carefully arranging his collection of superhero action figures in a perfect line. His tongue poked out slightly as he concentrated, and for a moment, watching him, I felt something close to peace. Then I heard it. The growl of my father's pickup truck pulling into the driveway, the engine cutting off with a violent shudder. My whole body tensed. Ethan's hands froze mid-reach for his Captain America figure. We both knew what was coming. The front door slammed open with enough force to rattle the picture frames on the wall. My father, Nathaniel Thornton, filled the doorway like a storm cloud given human form. He was a big man, 6'3", with shoulders broad from years of construction work and fists that knew only one language. His face was already red, that dangerous crimson that meant he'd been drinking since breakfast. His gaze landed on Ethan, and the toys scattered across the floor. Something ugly twisted in his expression. "What the hell is this mess? Get that junk cleaned up right now, boy. Or do you want to see how fast those little hands can fly?" Ethan scrambled to gather his toys, his small fingers fumbling, tears already welling in his eyes. I moved without thinking, stepping between my father and my son. "He was just playing, Dad. Please, I'll clean it up." My father's lip curled. "Playing? Spoiling the kid rotten? Making him soft like you?" He reached for his belt, his old Marine Corps belt, thick black leather with a heavy brass buckle, the kind that left marks that lasted for days. I'd felt it before, many times. I grabbed his arm. "No, please, not in front of Ethan." He shook me off like I was nothing, and the belt came down. Not on Ethan, on me. The leather bit into my back with a crack that echoed through the house, and white-hot pain exploded across my shoulders. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek, tasting copper, refusing to scream. "You will never touch my son," I said through gritted teeth. "Never." He raised the belt again, but before it could fall, a voice cut through the tension. "Oh, are we doing this performance again?" My mother, Catherine, stood in the doorway to the kitchen, a delicate china plate in her hands, piled high with petite fours. She was eating one, slowly, her perfectly manicured fingers bringing it to her lips with practiced grace. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine, blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, pearls at her throat. "How pathetic," she continued, taking another dainty bite. "You think playing the martyr makes you special, Rebecca? Look at your boy. He's just as weak and useless as you are." Ethan, still clutching his action figures, turned to face her. His little face was streaked with tears, but there was something else there too, something fierce. "Leave my mom alone!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear and defiance. My father's face darkened to a shade of purple I'd never seen before. He took a step toward Ethan, and I threw myself forward, positioning my body as a shield. The belt came down again, harder this time. My father grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking my head back. "Who do you think you are? That brat needs to learn his place, and you need to learn yours. You're nothing." He shoved me to the floor, and my shoulder collided with the coffee table. The glass top shattered under the impact, shards scattering across the carpet like frozen tears. I lay there, stunned, blood seeping from a dozen tiny cuts on my arms. My mother stepped over me, careful not to get any blood on her cream-colored heels. "Clean this mess up before the dinner party tonight. I won't have your blood ruining my Persian rug." The door slammed as they left. I heard the clink of glasses from the dining room. They were pouring drinks, celebrating my sister Serena's acceptance onto the high school cheerleading squad. Ethan crawled over to me, his small hands touching my face with heartbreaking gentleness. "Mama, are you okay?" I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. "I'm okay, baby. Mama's okay." But I wasn't okay, and as I held my son in that room full of broken glass and broken promises, something inside me crystallized. A decision. A vow. "They're going to regret this," I murmured, so quietly that Ethan couldn't hear. "I promise you, sweetheart, one day they're going to regret everything." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of aching muscles and careful movements. But I didn't complain. I didn't cry. I watched everything. I watched my father leave for work every morning at 6:30. I watched him come home at 5, heading straight for the liquor cabinet. I watched my mother spend hours on the phone with her friends, gossiping, trading secrets, building and destroying reputations with carefully chosen words. And I learned that my father kept his wallet on the kitchen counter every night. I learned that my mother never locked her phone, that she kept detailed records of every piece of gossip, every secret. I learned that they cared about exactly two things: their reputation and their comfort. Everything else was expendable. Ethan became my shadow during those weeks. One afternoon, he came up to me with a piece of paper. It was a picture of a house, small and simple, with two stick figures standing in front. Above it, in shaky crayon letters, he'd written, "Just us." My throat tightened. "It's beautiful, honey. Is that where we can go? Somewhere where Grandpa and Grandma aren't mean?" I knelt down, cupping his small face in my hands. "One day, baby, I promise. One day we'll have our own place, just you and me." In that moment, I knew. Escaping wasn't enough. They'd follow us. They'd find us. No, escaping wasn't enough. I needed to burn their world down first. I started keeping a notebook, a small black composition book that I hid under my mattress. In it, I wrote everything: dates, times, what was said, what was done. I documented every bruise, every cut, every cruel word. I took photographs when I could, using an old disposable camera. I photographed the marks on my back, the fading bruises on my arms, the tiny scars on Ethan's hands. But more than that, I studied them. My father was running for city council. It was all he talked about, his chance to finally be somebody important in Fairhaven. My mother's entire existence revolved around her social standing. She hosted tea parties, organized charity drives, sat on the board of the Fairhaven Ladies Auxiliary. Their reputations were everything to them. It was their oxygen. And I was going to cut off their air supply. 2 months after that terrible Sunday, Ethan had a school play. It was a small production, just a spring pageant where the kindergarten and first grade classes performed songs. Ethan had been practicing for weeks, so excited he could barely sleep. He was going to be a tree in the third act. The morning of the performance, he asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Will Grandpa and Grandma come watch?" I hesitated. "I don't know, honey, but I'll be there, I promise." That evening, I sat in the school auditorium, surrounded by other parents and grandparents. Next to me were 2 empty seats. I'd reserved them, placed programs on the cushions with my parents' names written on them. I'd even called to remind them that morning. They never came. While I sat watching my son stand on that stage with such pride, such innocent hope as he scanned the crowd for his grandparents, they were at home throwing a party for Serena. After the play, Ethan ran up to me, his paper leaves rustling. "Did they see me, Mama?" I pulled him into my arms, feeling my heart shatter. "No, baby, but I saw you, and you were perfect." He nodded, trying to smile, but I saw it. That flicker of hurt in his eyes, that small death of hope. That night, after I tucked Ethan into bed, I stood at the window looking out at the lights of Fairhaven. The notebook was in my hands, and I was no longer just recording. I was planning. Enough was enough. I started going out more. I went to church services at First Baptist. I volunteered at the library. I attended PTA meetings. I smiled. I listened. I made myself invisible while simultaneously making myself present in all the right places, and I gathered intelligence. I learned that Mayor Wilson was looking for a reason to block my father's council candidacy. I learned that Mrs. Dolores Hartley, the grande dame of the Ladies' Auxiliary, valued authenticity above all else. I learned that the head of the PTA had a zero-tolerance policy for child welfare issues. One evening, while my mother was hosting her book club, I checked her room. In her vanity was a locked drawer. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Documentation of every piece of gossip, every affair, every secret she'd ever collected. I didn't take anything that day, but I memorized where everything was. My plan began to take shape. I wouldn't confront them directly. I wouldn't scream or fight. No, I would do something far more devastating. I would tell the truth, but not to them, to everyone else. Late one night, I sat at my desk and began to write. Anonymous letters, each one carefully crafted, each one containing specific verifiable details. The first letter went to Mayor Wilson, detailing 3 separate incidents of domestic violence, complete with dates and descriptions. The second went to Mrs. Hartley, quoting things my mother had said about other women in the auxiliary. The third went to the PTA, including photocopies of the pictures I'd taken. I sent them all from different locations. Then I waited. The first ripples appeared within days. Conversation would stop when my father entered the hardware store. Women would glance at my mother during church and whisper. My father noticed. He came home one evening in a rage. "Someone's spreading lies about me. If I find out who..." My mother paced, trying to call her friends, trying to control the narrative. But for the first time, people weren't answering. I said nothing. I kept my head down, served dinner, cleaned up afterward. But inside, I was smiling. A week later, my father received a letter. His candidacy had been withdrawn. They cited concerns about character and judgment. He destroyed our living room, overturned furniture, punched a hole in the wall. For the first time in his life, his reputation had been damaged in a way he couldn't fix. But I wasn't done. My mother was hosting her annual spring tea party, the social event she spent months planning. Every important woman in town would be there. On the morning of the party, Ethan and I finished the preparations. On the main table, right in the center, was a large manila envelope. The guests began arriving at 2 o'clock. They settled into my mother's living room, their voices creating a pleasant murmur. My mother was in her element, holding court, performing. After the first round of tea, someone noticed the envelope. "Catherine, dear, there's a package here." My mother's smile didn't falter. "Oh, please open it." Mrs. Hartley picked up the envelope and pulled out the contents. Then her face went white. "Catherine, what is this?" My mother moved closer, still smiling. Then she saw what Mrs. Hartley was holding, and the color drained from her face. Photographs, dozens of them. The ones I'd taken, but also others I'd found. Evidence of violence that stretched back years. Attached to each photo was a caption in my mother's own handwriting that I'd practiced for weeks. "This is what you admire. This is the family you celebrate." The room erupted in horrified whispers. Women passed the photographs around, their faces ranging from shock to disgust. Mrs. Hartley looked at my mother with profound disappointment. "Catherine, is this true?" My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "This is a mistake. A lie." "Are those your daughter's bruises?" Judge Barnes asked coldly. "Is that your grandson?" One by one, the women stood and left. My mother stood frozen in the center of her living room, surrounded by her beautiful decorations, utterly alone. When the last guest had gone, she turned to me. I was standing in the kitchen doorway. "You," she whispered, "you did this." I didn't deny it. "Who would believe trash like me?" I asked softly, throwing her own words back at her. My father came home, having heard about the disaster. He stormed in, his face purple with rage. "What did you do?" he roared at my mother. "She did it!" my mother shrieked, pointing at me. "She's been planning this." My father turned to face me. Ethan was at my side, his hand clutching mine. "You think you're clever? You think you can ruin us with your lies?" I stood my ground. For the first time in my life, I looked my father in the eye and didn't flinch. They weren't lies. Every word was true. "You did this. Both of you." He raised his hand, but this time, something was different. He hesitated. For the first time, there were consequences. His hand dropped. "Get out," he said, his voice shaking. "Get out of my house." I smiled, gladly. Within an hour, Ethan and I were gone. We drove through the night, leaving Fairhaven behind. We ended up in Richmond, Virginia. I found a job waiting tables, then worked my way up to manager. Ethan started at a new school. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. He made friends. He smiled, really smiled. Years passed. Good years. I went back to school, earned my degree, got a better job. We moved into a small house with a yard. We built a life that was ours, untainted by violence or fear. I heard about my parents occasionally. My father never ran for office again. My mother's social standing never recovered. They'd become pariahs. My father lost his business. Nobody wanted to hire a man accused of beating his family. They'd moved to a smaller house, struggling financially and socially. Ethan graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to the University of Virginia. The day we moved him into his dorm, he turned to me. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I know it wasn't easy, raising me on your own, but you gave me a childhood where I felt safe and loved. I just want you to know that I see that, and I'm going to make you proud." I couldn't speak. I just pulled him into a hug. "You already make me proud, every single day." After I left him at college, I drove back to Richmond alone. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and thought about the journey that had brought me here, about the girl who'd believed she deserved the abuse, about the moment that girl became a mother and found strength she didn't know she possessed, about the careful planning, the strategic dismantling of my parents' facade, and about now. Ethan was 13 when the knock came. It was a Saturday afternoon. I answered the door, and there they were, my father and mother, standing on my porch. They looked so much older. My father's hair had gone completely gray, his once imposing frame now stooped. My mother's face was lined with bitterness. "Rebecca," my father said, his voice rough, "we need to talk." I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway, creating a barrier between their world and mine. "Please," my mother added, her voice cracking, "we need you to tell people the truth. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." I looked at them for a long moment. "You once asked who would believe trash like me. Turns out, everyone believed me, because I wasn't lying." "We're your parents," my father said, desperation in his voice. "We raised you. You owe us." "I owe you nothing. You had a choice every single day. You chose violence. You chose cruelty. These are your consequences." My mother's face crumpled. "I'm your mother. I need you." I thought about all the times I'd needed her. "You had a daughter. You had a grandson. You could have chosen to love us. Instead, you chose to break us. But you didn't break me. You made me stronger. Please, my father said, and I saw fear in his eyes. I stepped back and began to close the door. Goodbye, I said simply. Rebecca, wait. My mother cried, but I didn't wait. I closed the door firmly and heard the click echo through the house. That click was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of freedom. Through the window, I watched them stand on my porch for a long moment. Then they turned and walked away, their shoulders hunched. They looked so small. They climbed into an old sedan and drove away. Ethan came out of his room. Who was that, Mom? I pulled him into a hug. Nobody important, just some people from a long time ago. Are they gone? Yes, honey, they're gone. Years continued to pass. Ethan graduated from college and started working for a nonprofit helping at-risk youth. He met a wonderful woman named Jasmine, a teacher. They got married in our backyard, surrounded by chosen family. When they announced they were expecting a baby, I felt profound joy. The night Ethan's daughter was born, I held her in my arms and looked down at her tiny face. What are you going to name her? I asked. Hope? Ethan said. Her name is Hope, because that's what you gave me, Mom. Hope for a better future. I cried, holding my granddaughter. This was what victory looked like. Not my parents' downfall, though that had been necessary. Real victory was this. A new generation born into love, a cycle of violence broken, a family built on respect instead of fear. I'd bought the restaurant where I worked and renamed it the Phoenix. It became a gathering place for the community. I hired people who needed second chances, single mothers, people in recovery, folks who'd been formerly incarcerated. I'd learned what it meant to be invisible, to be considered disposable, and nobody who worked for me would ever feel that way. One Tuesday, a regular customer named Pearl stayed late. Rebecca, I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years, but this place, what you've built here, it's special. You should be proud. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Thank you, that means more than you know. After she left, I looked around at my restaurant. Every table was full. My staff moved efficiently, greeting customers by name, making people feel welcome. This was mine. I'd built this from nothing, from pain and determination. My parents had tried to make me believe I was worthless, but here I was, thriving. I'd built a business. I'd raised a remarkable son. I'd created a life full of meaning. The doorbell rang one afternoon, about a year after Hope was born. I was babysitting Hope, who was napping. I opened the door and stopped breathing. It was my mother, alone. She looked ancient, skeletal, leaning heavily on a cane. Rebecca, she said, barely a whisper. Please, I need to speak with you. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I wouldn't let her near my granddaughter. Your father died, she said. 3 months ago. Heart attack. I felt nothing. I'm dying too. Cancer. 6 months maybe? She looked up at me. I know I have no right to ask, but I can't die without telling you the truth. That you were right about everything. That we were monsters. That we destroyed the one thing that should have been sacred. Her voice broke. I spent my whole life caring about what other people thought, and it cost me everything that mattered. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that you won. You were stronger than us. Everything that happened to us we deserved. I looked at this woman who had tormented me for so many years. You're right. You don't deserve forgiveness. But I will tell you this. I stopped thinking about you years ago. You don't matter to me anymore. She nodded, tears flowing. I know. That's what I deserve. She turned to go, then paused. Is he happy? Ethan? Incredibly, he has a wife who loves him, a daughter who adores him, a career helping other kids. He's everything you and Dad could never be. He's kind. She flinched. Good, that's good. I watched her walk away, this ghost of a woman. She got into an old car and drove away, and I knew I'd never see her again. I went back inside, where Hope was waking up. She smiled when she saw me, and I picked her up, holding her close. You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, I told her. You're going to grow up safe. That night, I took the notebook out of the closet. I sat in my backyard, in the fire pit Ethan had built, and I burned it. Page by page, I watched the documentation of my suffering turn to ash. I didn't need it anymore. As the last page curled in the flames, I felt something release in my chest. I was free, not just from them, but from the anger, from the need for vindication. I was simply free. The Phoenix Diner celebrated its 10th anniversary the following year. Ethan gave a speech. My mom taught me that the opposite of abuse isn't just safety. It's love. It's building something so beautiful that the darkness can't touch it. Everyone applauded, and I wiped tears from my eyes. Later that night, I looked around at my restaurant. On the wall was a framed quote, "The best revenge is living well." But I'd learned it was more than that. The best revenge was living authentically, It was building something real. It was raising children who knew how to love. It was choosing every day to be better than the people who hurt you. My parents had tried to destroy me. They'd tried to make me believe I was worthless. But they were wrong. I was everything they'd said I couldn't be. I was strong. I was successful. I was loved. I was enough. And the most powerful thing I'd learned was this: I always had been. They didn't break me. They couldn't break me. All they did was give that spark a reason to become a flame, and then an inferno. They thought they were breaking me. All they did was forge a demon. But demons could choose what they fought for, and I'd chosen to fight for love, for justice, for the innocent child I'd been and the strong woman I'd become, and I'd won. Not because they'd lost everything, though they had. Not because I'd destroyed their reputation, though I had. But because I'd built something they could never understand or destroy, a life of meaning, purpose, and love. In the end, that was the only victory that mattered.